back to the Shreya podcast. I'm Ashley, your host, and this is Dr. Amy. She earned her doctorate in chiropractic and is a functional medicine practitioner, but her emphasis is on helping her clients develop mindset strategies that help them to improve their health and overall well-being. So I'd like to ask you, Dr. Amy, to tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you really got into both functional medicine and mindset.
Sure. So I've been practicing chiropractic for 25 years, but about, I would say 12 years ago, I started with functional medicine. And because functional medicine, it deals so much with chronic illnesses and we make a lot of behavioral and lifestyle changes, what ended up happening was when I was trying to help people make lifestyle changes, even though they would know what to do, they would not be able to do it. And a lot of people know what to do, right? But they just don't know how to get it done. So it kind of just organically evolved that I got into the mindset stuff because I basically just started teaching people tools I had used in my own life. I kind of had to pick up the pieces of my life at one point. And so I had done all this research and work on myself for such a long time. And when people were struggling and they have these obstacles that they were hitting, I just started sharing with them stuff I had done. And that kind of just organically developed into me really focusing on mindset. And when I started doing that, people's results just started skyrocketing because we put that piece in. And I think it was really missing. And I think it is missing with a lot of healthcare. So that's kind of how I fell into it. And then people started seeking me out just for that portion of it and didn't even go to the functional medicine anymore. So it just kind of evolved into other areas as well.
Sure. I think that's always how it happens, right? Like we've had some sort of challenge of our own and we start to figure out tools to help us achieve the goals that we're working on. And then just by nature of who we are, we want to share with people because it was effective or it made such a difference that it's important to get the word out. What are some of the most common obstacles you come up against with your clients?
Well, a lot of times, sometimes we have to figure that out, right? Because they don't even know what's stopping them from moving forward.
Right.
But some of the obstacles that tend to show up are things like they have a belief system in place and that's stopping them from moving forward. So one of the first things we have to do is figure out like if this is even possible for them in terms of healing. So really switching into possibility thinking, that's a big piece of it. One of the other obstacles that people come into conflict with is this story they've been telling themselves for a long time. So that tends to play a role in just, again, the possibility thinking. So we have to kind of turn around that story that they've got going and make it work in alignment with what their goals are. So if their goal is, health, then we've got to make sure their beliefs and their attitudes and what they even think is possible is going to align with that. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I learned quite a bit about mindset and positive psychology during the coaching program through the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. And what I thought was so interesting to learn, and I practice this with anyone who will listen and my kids a lot, and also a lot of the clients I work with, is the positive mindset piece, right? Like, I don't think people realize how impactful negative thoughts can be and what that internal dialogue sounds like can make or break the whole thing. So for me, what was the biggest takeaway, and I don't know what your experience has been, but it's that one negative thought is so powerful that it requires a minimum of 3 positives just to balance out the energy that negative thought carries.
Right. It's so impactful. And the thing about that is that we are wired to look for the negative.
Right.
Just from an evolutionary standpoint, because if you're looking at what's going right, there's no need for survival. Right. You've got to find what's going wrong so you can assess the situation and keep yourself safe. That is how we are hardwired. So we have to essentially overcome our hardwiring and switch that around. But you said something really important, and this is one of the things I do with my clients is you're talking about positivity. And sometimes it's really, this is one of the obstacles that show up again, is sometimes it's really hard to be positive, especially when you don't feel well. Like that's not an easy place to be in and think positive when you feel, horrible. So, for example, one of the tools I would use there is we don't necessarily need to switch to positive thinking. We need to switch to productive thinking. Productive.
What would an example be?
Yeah. So an example would be like, let's say the thoughts that you're thinking is, this is never going to change. I've been feeling like this for years. I don't even know what to do about it. Those are thoughts that are coming that keep people spiraling, thinking like this is never going to change. That's negative thinking. And if you don't necessarily believe that that's going to change, because it hasn't for the last 5 years, it's hard to go to a positive thought and go, yeah, this is going to go away. Yeah, I feel great, when you don't feel great. That would be positive thinking. But if your goal is to heal, then we would do something more like, okay, what can I get on board with here? I can get on board with thinking, okay, just because it's been this way for the last 5 years doesn't mean it's always going to be this way. Okay. Everything in life changes. Where I'm sitting today, I'm not in the same place I was 10 years ago with many things. So life, just everything always changes. So just switching to thinking like possibility thinking. Is it possible this could change? Of course it's possible. Is it possible that I could run across some information that would change everything for me, or even change something just a little bit? Of course that's possible. That would be more productive or possibility thinking. And it's just those little shifts in your thoughts and in your beliefs to think, okay, what if it did change? Like that would be another tool. What if questions, right? So What if it did change? You're not necessarily going to positive thinking. You're going to more productive, meaning more in alignment with my goal. Asking a what if question is a tool I start teaching people. What if it did change, right?
Yeah.
That if it's never going to. So that's you coming to a conclusion rather than asking a what if question. That can
I love that.
everything, right?
Yeah. So, and it seems like it would be really powerful too, because that can start to help then with that whole like visualization process. Right. So now you're getting creative with what could my life look like? What are the possibilities versus being stuck in that sort of can't, don't, want to, won't mindset. Right.
And I think another piece of that, Ashley, is that the reason that the negative thinking is so damaging is because, again, going back to the way neurologically we're wired, is that once your brain, we talk about, we use the big word reticular activating system in neurology, but that's just a system in the brain that allows you to filter all this unnecessary information for you and focus on what's important to you. Mm-hmm. So what happens with people when they spiral with the negative thoughts is they're focused on one thought, and that starts to create more and more thoughts like that because they're so focused on it that anything positive happening in their life, or anything that would be an opportunity for them perhaps to get better, is going to fly right by because they're so focused on the negative. So it's, it's kind of like, I always say, it's like if you get a new car and you even before you got it, if you were thinking about it, you suddenly notice all those cars on the road. And they've been there all along. You just didn't see them, right? And it's this thing with your health. It's like there's all these possibilities. There's all these opportunities. And by the way, there's a billion things going right in your body right now, but you're stuck on what isn't. And it spirals because you're stuck there. So that's another thing.
It makes perfect sense. And it comes back to one of the things that I always talk about, which is generating awareness.
Yes.
Right. So the first step, in my experience, and maybe you have a different approach or perspective, but is just becoming aware of what your thought process looks like, because that self-talk tape, at least in my, again, personal experience and with the clients I've worked with, that self-talk tape is something that probably got developed when we were really young. And it seems to hang on to all the negative things or nasty things people have either said to us or about us. And it just plays over and over and over again. And we're so accustomed to hearing it that we don't even realize the amount of negativity we're feeding ourselves all day long.
Right. So that's one of the first steps we do with clients is to become aware, because it's the difference between watching a movie and being in a movie, right? Because you're so engrossed in it. It's like back when we went to movie theaters, we're starting to go back now, but it's like, so when you're in a movie theater or even at home watching TV and you're so engrossed in the program, and then someone like coughs or bumps you or something, and it's like, oh, you snap out of it. You realize, oh, this is a program I'm watching, but you were so involved in it. So it's the same thing. It's like stepping back and having that awareness. Hey, like, these are the thoughts that are going on. I think I am the thoughts, but I'm not the thoughts.
Right.
I'm able to observe the thoughts. And so that in itself, like, that just flies by most people because they're not in the habit of doing that. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting too, is when you start to generate that awareness, it's like, okay, wait, where did that thought even come from? Is that my thought, or whose voice is that that's stuck in my head playing on repeat? Right. And it's usually not us. It's like a coach or a parent or a partner or, you know, a bully from school when we were a kid. Like it's really not our own thoughts that are even, and again, my experience, the ones causing the most damage. We start to believe them as true and they do become our voice and our thoughts. But I think when you start to generate that awareness and start catching those and looking at where it came from and whose it was, that becomes a really pretty powerful shift for a lot of people too.
That's huge. And yeah, it's not usually our voice. It's, you know, been put into us, as you said, like when we were young or whatever. But what ends up happening, like the next step of that, Ashley, is that it wasn't our voice originally, but then it becomes our voice. Why? Because we have life experience that now validates it to us. And that goes back to what I just said a minute ago. Because your mindset is focused on that belief that somebody else put in you originally, now your brain is going to filter out any information that would invalidate that thought, and you don't even realize it. And it goes straight to everything that will validate that belief for you. Mm-hmm. And now that other voice that was in your head has become your own voice because of your life experience. You'll say, well, it's true. Like, look, this happened, that happened, that happened. And it's like, well, but a million other things happened that you never became, again, aware of.
Right.
Because it went past you. So it's true.
And what do you think about, especially in terms of illness or dis-ease or diseased states, when people, I think they struggle sometimes, and this can go along with mindset about things that people have told you or you've heard over the course of your lifetime, but you start to become identified with those thoughts. So that becomes who you are. And then letting that go is almost scary because it's your identity. So how do you sort of start to work with people around, you know, reclaiming identity or finding out like who they really are and what these thoughts mean, or disassociating themselves with their disease or diagnoses that have kept them trapped in this space of illness and preventing them from being well?
That is such a good question, because you wouldn't believe how much that comes up in my practice. And that is a step-by-step process. It's not something that changes just immediately. You know, there's a process that goes on. But like everything else, when you can take baby steps, I like baby steps, you know, because when you try to do something huge all at one time, there's so many, like, you fail easier, it's more temporary, all that stuff. So I like to go in steps. But so one of the first steps of doing that, because the people are so identified with it, is, you know, to start to just decide, first of all, a simple decision, like, okay, this is who I am now because it's been around for so long, I'm so identified, but is this actually who I want to be? Everybody is going to say no to that.
Right.
So then coming up, well, who is it you do want to be? Because just to take that away and not replace it with something else can be really terrifying. But if you have something else to grab onto that's more possible, then that takes some of the fear away. And so that, that is one step. There's many steps, but it's just shifting that identity, figuring out, well, why is it so scary for me to let go of that? Right. Or, asking a simple question, who would I be without this story? That's another thing that we start to work on. Who would I be without this story? And then you find out, that's very telling, because it's like, that's one of the most pivotal questions I ask people. And it's like, and when you start to answer that, it's people are terrified because they're like, oh my gosh,
I don't know.
I don't.
Right.
And it goes back again to awareness, right? Like, I didn't even know I had that belief. I didn't even know. I worked with someone in a group last week who, came to that conclusion. It was like, she had been told her whole life who she was. This is a woman who's a senior citizen now, right? And becomes so identified with that. And it's like, she suddenly realized the people that made me that way are gone now. They're not even alive. But I've still got this story going of who I'm so identified with.
Right.
And so it's just, it's a, work in progress. But gosh, it is so freeing when you start to let go of those stories and see that it's possible to be somebody without that story. It's not so scary. So I think that's another piece of it, is just realizing that fear has been built up in the mindset as well, right? It's not even existing. And it's something you've created in your mind. So we start to dismantle the fears and replace them with things that are equally as true, so that people have the safety to hang on to that.
Yeah. And I think those are really powerful questions. I read a book by Byron Katie. I'm sure you're familiar with her. And it's like, is this thought true?
Yeah.
Is it really true? And who am I without this untrue thought that makes me feel awful about myself?
Right.
But it really, I think victim mindset is one of the toughest ones probably to let go of, right? Because we start to associate all of the things that have happened in our lives based on the fact that we were victim to or of some sort of behavior by someone else. And that's a tough one, even when we're sick, right? Like, why is this happening to me? Kind of mindset.
Right. And so people don't want to let go of the victim story because, and I'll tell you what, it is sneaky. It sneaks in, because I have even had it sneak in. I'm like so focused on, making sure I don't have that story running. And I found myself running that story in a roundabout way that I didn't even realize. I'll hear something coming out of my mouth and it doesn't sound like a victim, but it came from this place of like self-justification or patting myself on the back, like, hey, look at me, look how hard I'm working type stuff.
Right.
That's still a victim story, right? Because it's like, but you're doing it from a different place. You're doing it from a completely different place. So, but that victim story is hard to let go of because we want to identify with a lot of other people sometimes. There's so many reasons we keep a victim story going. Like, we want to be like other people, and the people we hang out with are all victims. That's one reason. Another reason could be like you're trying to self-justify something, right? So it's like there's so many reasons people hold on to a victim story, but that's where we start dismantling that too. Do you really want to be a victim? I mean, really, like in your soul, in your heart, no. But it's serving you in some way. So we got to figure out, what way is this victim story serving me? Is it making me feel better about myself? Is it making me feel like, sometimes we use it to drive us. So it can be like a driver too. Like, you can get benefit out of a victim story, but in the end, you keep this cycle going. So it's huge.
And I think important what you just mentioned about, maybe to like fit into a group, right? So the people that we're surrounding ourselves with are going to help or potentially impede this mindset shift and our healing, and that's a tough thing. Do you have to work through that with clients as well? Like, how to start to maybe shift your social circles and start to recognize like who's sabotaging you and who's feeding, that negative mindset monster?
Yeah, all the time. And it, there's different approaches to that, because some people you can eliminate easily, they're not adding value to your life. But some people, these are your spouses, your kids, your parents, like they come in different flavors. So some of them we can't eliminate so easily. So we have to start teaching ourselves, okay, this person's going to be in my life. If I, there's different, you can limit the time with them, but it actually, it all comes down to the same thing. All healing is self-healing. It comes from within. So when you don't worry about what the other person is saying or how they're affecting you, and you change yourself by changing your mindset, now you can make decisions from a place of power. And that changes everything for people. So this is, again, going back to your original question, like what are some of the obstacles? I would probably say the number one obstacle for everybody on this planet, whether you're dealing with like health or something else, we all do this. We're trying to change things on the outside, even when we say we're not. I'm trying to work on myself, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we're trying to change things from the outside when we have to change from the inside. When you start to change your mindset, then what people say to you, your reaction is totally different.
Right.
So, there's no one to change but the self.
Yes. And everything you're saying is so perfectly in alignment with what Shreya is all about, which is education and empowerment, right? And I think part of the scary part of the healing process for so many people is that you have to own it.
Right.
You have to own your role and how you got to where you are. And maybe a lot of it was other people, but you played an active role in your current condition, and you have to play an active role in changing it.
It's true. And you bring up a good point because, okay, let's say if someone, because, like I've worked with people, cancer patients, all kinds of stuff, like, someone might be watching this and think, well, I didn't choose that. I didn't bring that on myself. I didn't do that. Like, I'm not trying to say, and I know you're not too, trying to say that people have brought all this stuff on themselves. What we're saying is, hey, like, even if you're stuck with a terminal illness, like, how are you going to live with that illness? You're going to have to change yourself, right? And so the responsibility lies on us as to how we're going to feel, how we're going to experience life, and how we're going to act, how we're going to, and change the reaction. So, like, just because some illnesses, there's nothing that can be done about them, but that doesn't mean that you have to suffer from them, right?
Right.
Because you can have pain and not suffer, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you remind me of one of the most pivotal moments, I would say, in the very beginning of my like self-discovery and healing process was during a therapy session, actually. And I was asked the question why I chose to be in a relationship with my partner at the time that left me feeling unfulfilled and ignored and unappreciated and unsupported and all sorts of things that you aren't looking for in a relationship. And I remember getting very angry, saying, I am not choosing this. I did not choose this. I am not asking for this. And we got through the whole session. And this woman is a magician. You guys will probably meet her at some point in time, but she had written all the things down, right, on the whiteboard. And then we got to the end and she said, so tell me again, why are you choosing to be with someone who doesn't respect you, doesn't value you, is not supporting you, doesn't love you? And it was like this amazing light bulb moment went off, and I still get goosebumps when I think about it. But I finally saw that it was because I wasn't doing those things for myself. And that's how I was choosing it. That's how I was allowing it, is because I wasn't loving myself and I wasn't respecting myself and I wasn't using my voice. I wasn't honoring my truth. And so that put me in a position where I allowed other people to mimic that behavior. And the power of that kind of realization is unmatched, I think. So the work you're doing is so, so important. For mental health, for physical health and healing, just for general well-being and living a happy, healthy life. What are some of your most favorite success stories that you've experienced with clients?
Every story is my favorite because when you have an impact and see someone's life change so dramatically, it doesn't matter if it was, they completely turned their health around or they made just like a 2% shift.
Yeah.
It's so exciting for me because I feel like every insight that someone gets allows them to further themselves along the path. So like, I can't even pick a favorite, but to give you a few, I'll just give you one. Like someone came in, I'll change her name. Let's say her name's Kathy. She actually came in for low energy. She had some GI stuff, just fatigued, different symptoms. She came in for health. We did the functional medicine stuff, but it turns out she works for a professional sports team here in Chicago, and her boss was really, I would call it like verbally abused, just abusing. She's a super sweet, super nice lady. And she was being taken advantage of. She had no power within her own voice because she's in this large organization. And so as we started to talk, I started to realize this is a mindset thing here that's stopping her. And so we started to make some changes about how she handled this situation with her boss, who is her boss, right? So that's a big deal. And she started to make these little shifts, and the way her boss started treating her completely turned around. He respected her more. He flat out even went to tell her that. You know what I mean? Like some people don't go that far to even do that, but he did that. So anyway, her health started to turn around, right? Because we simply started looking at the mindset that she had and the belief she had about herself, about her job, about her boss. And then that turned around and started to impact her health. So, I mean, there are countless stories like that. Typically, if people come into me for health reasons, it almost always goes back. Like we'll find out it's something totally different. And then their health starts to turn around. So, so many stories.
That's great. I do agree. Like the mental component, the mental emotional component of healing is just so important. And that's what I feel like had been missing in functional medicine for so long, which is why this is happening now, because I just feel like we can do so much on the physical body in terms of like the gut health and chasing that, for years. But if we don't start to really look at underlying causes, mental and emotional health being a big piece of that, we're not really getting anywhere after a certain point, So
that's exactly how I fell into it, is like I said at the beginning, like this people's health started to really take off in a new direction when we started to address that mental health, mindset, I would call it.
Sure. So speaking of that, do you offer any other healing modalities that we need to share with our listeners?
So I do all kinds of things in functional medicine, and I utilize things like lab testing and a lot of nutrition and lifestyle changes. So there's all those components to it. But the mindset piece is the piece that I feel like, really is the missing piece.
Yeah.
People. So
super important.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are interested in reaching Dr. Amy or feel like this is something that you could greatly benefit from, she does do mindset coaching with us at Balance Wellness Centers, but you can also find her in her practice. Can you tell us how people can reach you directly?
Yeah, so my website, which does cover the functional medicine and the mindset coaching and actually chiropractic as well. I do still a little bit of that. You can go to dramy.com and you spell that out, doctoramy.com. That's my website. And I will give out my blog site for anyone who's interested, because there's a lot of free content on there with actionable steps. I take a principle and then I give actionable steps. And that site is youareunstoppable.com. So that's all free content for people. But if you want to, and you can reach me there as well, too.
Awesome. Great. And you do in-person or telemedicine? How can people work with you?
either way, do in person, and I also do virtual visits. So
great. So anybody who's out there listening, doesn't matter where you're at, if you
anyway.
feel like Dr. Amy is someone you need in your life, which I think you probably do, feel free to reach out. If you have questions and can't remember how to reach her, you can always come get us at info@shreya.wellness.com. But thank you, Dr. Amy, so much for being here and sharing all of what you're doing and your amazing work with the listeners. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashley. I really appreciate and I'm honored to be part of your podcast.
Yeah. And thank you all for listening. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please head over and subscribe. Give Dr. Amy and I a 5-star rating, and please share this information with your friends and family. It's the only way we can get the message out, is if you guys are sharing things that you feel like are important and pertinent. And we really hope that we're making positive impact. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day.
Bye.